The Panthers checked a lot of boxes during free agency, but the one box they left unchecked was at corner. Will they take one at 19? We'll look at 3 prospects that could go 19th overall to the Panthers right here on Locked On Panthers.
You are Locked On Panthers, your daily Carolina Panthers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into another edition of the Locked On Panthers podcast, a part of the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, as always, Julian Council, and let's take a look at some of the top cornerback prospects in the upcoming 2026 NFL Draft. In just 2 weeks' time up in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, we're going to look at Avieon Terrell from Clemson, Jalon Kilgore from South Carolina, Malik Muhammad from Texas, and we're going to do that with some help from our friends over on the Locked On College Podcast Network. So Morgan Thomas from Clemson, he's going to help us out. Chris Marler from Locked On Gamecocks and Brad Kellner, we talked to him on Tuesday. He's back again from Locked On Longhorns. But let's start up the show by discussing whether the Panthers are ready to take a Clemson Tiger for the first time in their history in the NFL Draft. We talked about it last week with Eric McClain with Blake Miller. Let's talk about it today with Morgan Thomas from Locked On Clemson when taking a look at Avieon Terrell. The Carolina Panthers played its inaugural season down at Clemson Memorial Stadium, and somehow, some way, in their 30-plus years as an organization, have never, not one time, drafted a player from Clemson University. Maybe that will change. On to join us right now is Morgan Thomas of Locked On Clemson. Morgan, do you understand? I asked Eric McClain this last week when he came on to talk about Blake Miller. We're going to talk about Avieon Terrell here momentarily, but do you understand how it is possible that that has not happened at any point over the last 30-plus years?
Well, somebody must be a big booster of South Carolina Gamecocks for the Carolina Panthers because, like you said, there's been nobody from Clemson. And when you asked me to come on this show, I was like, why? You're not going to draft somebody from Clemson? There's no way. It's not possible. I think the closest we got was Ben Boulware, and that was like a undrafted free agent. So, you know, I'm holding out hope that eventually Carolina will take a Clemson player. I was really hoping that, Deshaun back in the day would be the guy, but, maybe one of these group of guys will be it.
Yeah, and a couple years ago, during 2020, Isaiah Simmons was a guy that a lot of people were talking about, whether it be him or Derek Brown. Of course, Carolina drafted Derek Brown, and Isaiah Simmons is now a Panther. Again, was on the roster last year. They re-signed him to a 1-year deal. We'll see if his role expands this upcoming season. So it's not like fans or podcasters like me have not had the appetite to see a Clemson player. It just has not happened. And yeah, the organization continuously, though, they love getting South Carolina Gamecocks. So maybe there is a little bit of that Palmetto State rivalry that's going on inside the building there at 100 South Main Street in Uptown Charlotte. But looking at Avieon Terrell, I was telling you this before the show, man, last year for Clemson, and I'm sorry for the Clemson people out there who have heard me say this a number of times, was extremely disappointing. And as a North Carolina fan, has no connection to Clemson, has no hatred, no ill will towards them, I was very frustrated by that season because I thought they were going to be outstanding. And we saw a lot of top guys who did not live up to that hype a year ago. But one of them I felt like did was Avieon Terrell. So when you pop on the tape, watch Avieon Terrell over the last couple of years, what stands out to you that makes him such a good player?
Well, what I really like about Avieon Terrell is that he's kind of been that doubted guy. You know, he's been that chip on his shoulder. He's had to look up to his older brother who was amazing and then got even better as he got into the NFL. So there's a lot of like expectations that he's been having to try to reach and a lot of doubt that he's also been having to overcome, mainly because of his height and his just overall build. But I got to tell you, if you just look at that, you are missing the entire point because this guy is fluid. He's in on every single play. As you mentioned, 2025 was not that great of a season for Clemson. But when you look at on the defensive side of the ball, the one guy that I would draft if I was a GM, it wouldn't be big name Peter Woods, wouldn't be big name TJ Parker. It would be Avieon Terrell because all of those key impact plays that were necessary, that they needed to stop, the guy was there. He was in on it every single time. And not just in a passing play. He definitely was one of those guys that could get in and not be afraid to put his hand on the ball or put his head on the ball when it comes to the running plays and stopping the outside. So he's not, even though he's leaner, he's not as kind of physically imposing. he is one of those guys that's just scrappy. He wants to be a part of everything. I love his ability to just play press. Clemson, as you know, with Mike Reed, is going to press you a lot of times. They're going to put you out on an island, which you kind of like when you're kind of going to the NFL because you're getting that experience. You're not just sheltered with a lot of zone coverage, right?
Mm-hmm.
So he is very, very disciplined, has great footwork and timing. He can crowd just about every wide receiver out there. Now, ball skills against much taller receivers, that's going to be a little bit of a concern, but it's not because he's not going to be there. There were plenty of times where somebody got a catch on him and it was like, man, that he was all over him. But, it was still just possible because of maybe a little bit of a size difference, but it's not because he's not going to be giving you 110% effort. So you got to like what he brings to you with those types of strengths, because that's something that that kind of competitiveness and that fire that he brings, and just every down type dude, it's going to spread in your locker room.
I love it as far as the breakdown there, because you've already answered two of my next questions about him being able to play man or zone coverage at the next level and whether he would have a tough time against bigger, more physical receivers. So you certainly answered that second one. You said they played a lot of man coverage, a lot of press coverage at Clemson. Here in Carolina, Jerry Rivera, the DC, runs primarily a bunch of zone. I think the most zone coverage in the league last season. Do you think he's better at man? Can he play zone, or you think he's pretty flexible either way?
I'd like to say that he could adapt and be more flexible in that way. He's going to be somebody who's going to give you the best effort for sure. The biggest problem that I have is that size and that durability at the NFL level. And he's not really a super INT type guy. You know what I mean? He's going to be a pass breakup type of guy a lot, but it will be an area, if he were to get picked up by the Panthers, that he's going to have to adjust to. So that could be one of those big areas that he's going to have to really work with his position coach a lot on that.
And looking at the Panthers depth chart right now, Jaycee Horn, South Carolina Gamecock, he is going to be the number one corner moving forward for Carolina. He got paid to be that a year ago, and really when they drafted him, that was the expectation. He has lived up to that billing so far. Mike Jackson, he's entering the last year of his deal. Maybe Carolina decides to give an extension, but right now, at least heading to the draft, that has not been the case. So he could be out the door after this upcoming season. When you project AJ Terrell, not AJ, well, AJ is his brother, by the way, for the folks out there. If you didn't know, because Morgan mentioned it, but you maybe did not know that. But down in Atlanta, AJ Terrell, one of the also top paid corners in the league. This is his younger brother, but Avieon Terrell, do you see him more as a guy who's going to have to play inside at nickel because of his size, or can you think he could play potentially on the outside and be that number two corner for the Panthers?
In the right scheme, he could be a number two guy. He may be kind of a rotational fit at the cornerback position at the NFL level, again, because of his size. That nickel package could be great. He's got familiarity with, Isaiah Simmons, as you mentioned, and they kind of, when they were much younger, of course. But I feel like, the fact that he can be a plug and play guy, and the fact that he's very versatile, I do believe that he can immediately contribute in man for sure. I'm 100% confident in that, and eventually in zones as well. Will he be able to reach the level and expectation of his brother? Time will tell, but that's what I love about younger brothers for sure. Whenever I've coached youth league with my daughter or seen my friends and their sons coach youth league, there's always that something about the younger guy, right? There's always that little brother that had to sit on the sideline and watch their bigger brother do everything. I feel the same way with Aveion Terrell. And when Clemson was having the biggest struggles of last season, a lot of times off the field, the guy that was right next to Dabo leading the team was Aveion Terrell. So it's that kind of stuff. Like I said, it may not, if you only look at his measurables, you're going to say, well, maybe we can get a bigger guy, a taller guy, better frame, lengthier guy. But when you look at the total package, he's definitely a guy that can rotate in cornerback 2, nickel. You got to like it. I mean, he's not going to hurt your team at all.
Yeah, and you bring up the fact that they struggled last year and him being one of those leaders and being right next to Dabo. I do remember distinctly that game against Pittsburgh Syracuse, where Louis Riddick, he was circling TJ Parker being like, hey, 3, you want to be a top pick? Maybe find a way to stop the run. And he was circling Peter Woods all game too. But after that game, after the rain delay, I do remember Dabo being emotional and right there with his arm around him was Avieon Terrell. So that says a lot about their relationship, a lot about that kid as a leader. And it'll be interesting to see how he ends up playing if he does come to Carolina and how he projects in the NFL. But that's Morgan Thomas of Locked On Clemson. Again, check him out over on YouTube and wherever you listen to your favorite podcast. Follow him on socials at The Morgan T Show. Doing a great job. And, it's not been great for Clemson this past year, but Dabo's still Dabo. Maybe they'll figure it out. Baseball, not going great right now, but I think Eric Backage, we saw his first year. It did not start off well and ended up being a top 4 national seed. So it's possible that they can go back and be that. Hopefully not starting this weekend because they're playing against my Tar Heels, but the weekend after that, go ahead, Clemson baseball, get back on track. But Morgan, thank you so much for your time, man.
Yeah, I appreciate it. And I'll give you one sleeper, one guy you might want to look if you're going to overlook all of those other guys that you've probably mentioned. But Antonio Williams, I'm telling you, you talk about the same.
I like Antonio.
You talk about the same guy. If you take Avieon Terrell and put him on offense, that type of just good all-around leader that you really want in your locker room, Antonio Williams is that guy. He won't be highly drafted, I don't think, but he'll be up there, and he should be somebody that could be one of those slot guys. So and as you mentioned with Avieon Terrell, the fact that he can get in on the run is just super valuable for sure. So those two guys, I would tell you, hey, go draft those guys.
Glad you brought up Antonio because one of our listeners who is a Clemson fan, I've talked to him in DMs a couple of times. He did say this to me, I believe, the other day, asking about Antonio Williams. He's like, Carolina's not going to draft him because he went to Clemson. But what do you think about Antonio Williams? I love the guy. So certainly would love to see that happen because Carolina does need a slot. But again, Morgan Thomas does a great job over in Locked On Clemson. Thanks again for joining me. Take a quick pause here on the show. Then we'll stay there in the state of South Carolina, but head from the upstate to the Midlands to talk about Jalon Kilgore from South Carolina here in just a moment on Locked On Panthers. The NBA playoffs are here where every possession matters, every matchup is magnified, and every game swings a series. And right now, FanDuel is giving new customers a great way to get in on the action. Here's what I like about it. You can bet just $5 and get $250 in bonus bets if your first bet wins. The app makes it easy to follow the action with player stats, trends, and matchups all in one place. And during the playoffs, that extra insight really matters when you're looking at stars, role players, and key moments. It just makes the entire playoff experience more engaging from start to finish, and even better when the Hornets are in it. Head to FanDuel.com to get started. FanDuel, play your game. Let's head to the Midlands and talk about the South Carolina Gamecocks and talk about another cornerback prospect that could make sense for the Panthers early in the 2026 NFL draft. That is Jalon Kilgore. And we know the Panthers love some Gamecocks. Chris Marler of Locked On Gamecocks on with us right now. And if you're a college football fan, you probably have seen his handle at Vern Funquist, one of the best handles out there in the CFB Twitter game. Chris, what's going on, man?
First off, the Midlands, the street cred already off the bat is that's fantastic work there. But yeah, man, this is my favorite time of year that's not in the season. It's a fun time because I know college basketball's coming in. We still have college baseball. We had the Masters coming up this, in a short few days, and then on top of that, you have the draft coming up, which is fun. It's just a lot of work, and there's just so much going on. But I'm excited, man. It's a fun time.
Yeah, and you think about it too, being down in with Columbia right now, South Carolina. I mean, you talk about the draft. There's plenty of guys we're going to talk about one right now, Jalon Kilgore, that could go early in the draft this year.
Yeah.
The Masters are going on this week. A lot of people staying in Columbia because that's the biggest city that's closest that you can actually get a hotel room to. And then you talk about baseball. I mean, Paul Maneri. Thankfully, that's finally over for a lot of folks down there.
God.
But let's focus in on Jalon Kilgore, man. I look at the season last year. I told you this before the show. I got a lot of friends from high school who went to South Carolina. My fiance is from Columbia. She's a Gamecock. I am wrapped up in this Gamecock world. I am in no way a South Carolina fan. I'm a North Carolina guy. And the fact they call themselves Carolina, it grosses me out. But I watched this team a lot last season, and a lot did not go right, especially offensively. Defensively, though, the secondary was rock solid, and a guy like Jalon Kilgore was a big part of that. When you watched him this past season and during his career in Columbia, what really stood out to you as far as him as a player?
Yeah, right off the bat, I mean, he got better every year. That was the big thing, and I think there's not a lot of places, and there's not a lot of to hang your hat on in South Carolina right now. Just being honest, I love Shane Beamer. I think he's the right guy for the job right now, and I'm very excited for this year. And I think they're going to trend up. But I will also say everything you just said is factual and fair, and it may hurt some feelings. But I mean, it was a very frustrating year a season ago. The one thing that you can really hang your hat on if you're a South Carolina fan, especially about this football program, is the development, and specifically the development of the players in the secondary and the back seven has been tremendous under Clayton White, but especially the defensive backs with Torian Gray. Jalen Kilgore coming in this past year, especially a year after you lose Nicky Manwari, a guy that played seemingly every snap and has been so crucial to this defense for 3 straight years. The team hasn't won a lot of games, but they have been a really, really good defense, specifically at forcing turnovers, not just in the SEC, but in the country as a leader in that. And Kilgore was part of that. And I think the biggest thing for me is Kilgore went from being a guy that was a good piece in the secondary in 2024 that was on a really good defense to one of the premier players on that defense, and the guy that really showed that he can come down to the box and play, close to the line of scrimmage and be much better against the run. And I think more than anything, it just, again, he got better every single year, whether it be in coverage, whether it be in limiting, yards after catch or big plays and anything like that. He just was a much better player his final year, and the guy that the Gamecocks are definitely going to miss next year.
Yeah, and I think it's a good point to bring up the fact that he was so good this past year, not just because, like, you think about the defense they had in 2024, where, I mean, everybody on that defensive front was excellent. And I thought this past year, I mean, you still have Dylan Stewart that was out there. Brian Thomas Jr. got an opportunity to finally be the guy opposite of him. And he had Nick Barrett inside there. And I thought overall the defensive front was fine. It was not excellent like it was past year. Right. And that gives you an opportunity to really evaluate just how good these guys on the back end are. And I thought that he and Brandon Cisse, DQ Smith, who had been a long time starter down in Columbia as well, that all of them really showed out pretty well. And Cisse is another guy that potentially could be coming to Carolina as an early pick. Now, more when looking at him, the Panthers play a lot of zone defense in this Jero Vero's scheme. Right. Do you think that Kilgore fits better as a man corner or a guy who can play zone, or does it really matter?
So I think that he's physically talented enough and a good enough athlete to do either. I think the transition from college to NFL would make more sense for him in zone. I think the other thing too is that just from his pedigree from college, and you don't get to say that phrase a lot with South Carolina, but like, again, Clayton White's defense and the ability to be able to force turnovers, and then also Torian Gray. I mean, like, this is a guy who's not going to shy away from competition. If him and Cisse, like you mentioned, if they end up being drafted, which they will, and most of them most likely in the higher rounds, and hopefully day 2 at the latest, those 2 guys will end up being the 8th players drafted from the secondary in South Carolina in the last 6 years. Like, that's a very, very promising thing. I think for Kilgore specifically, he's so good. His hips are so good. And just being able to drop back in coverage, and he's such a versatile athlete. I think zone makes more sense. Again, I don't think it's a kid that's ever going to shy away from competition. And if you want him to play man, I think the first thing you should do is tell him that you don't think he can play man. And then he will figure out a way to make sure he is on the field doing just that.
Yeah, and looking more into him, potentially going to Carolina as a prospect, when you look at his size, do you think he can be able to handle bigger, more physical receivers at this level?
That's such a good question because I do think physically, I mean, he was so much more active in the run game. But as you know, just as well as anyone else that's watched, football at the NFL level and collegiate level, there's a difference in athlete that you're going to have to be defending, and it's a huge jump. So I think he looks the part. Being only 210 pounds, that is a concern, right? Only 6'1", 210, that's going to be a concern, especially if you're having to guard some of these bigger, just freak athletes that you see all over the NFL, especially at receiver. Or if you have him in zone, he's got to cover a tight end going across the middle or anything like that. I think that is also a concern I would have. I do think physically he would be that would be right off the bat. I think in year 1, that would be something he would have to really prove and grow into. I think in the long run, again, it's a guy that's had over 2,100 snaps in his collegiate career. So if it was a huge glaring issue, I think it probably would have presented or reared its head a little bit sooner rather than later. I still think that he's going to be a really, really good prospect no matter what position they put him at.
Yeah, it's a lot of snaps to play, and like the tape does not lie. You can look at the pro days, and Carolina was down there. They did a local visit with Kilgore, as they do seemingly every year, a local visit with the entire South Carolina team. As you look at the roster currently, I mean, last year DJ Wonnum was here. He's no longer a Panther, but Jaycee Horn was drafted not too long ago in the top 10. There's other guys. Xavier Legette's here. there's Gamecock after game, like Shi Smith was drafted. They love South Carolina guys. They won't draft a Clemson guy. We just talked to the Clemson host before and laughed about that, but they love Gamecock. So looking at him coming to Carolina, if he does get drafted, just trying to project out his role. Jaycee is going to be the number one guy. They're paying him to be that. He's been that for them. There's an argument could say that Mike Jackson has been, at least PFF believes, but he's been maybe a little bit better than Jaycee the last 2 years, but his contract is going to expire after next season. So if Kilgore comes in, do you see him being more of a nickel throughout his career, or is he a guy after maybe this upcoming season in 2027 could move out there to the outside and hold up there as well?
I mean, so again, personally, I think of a nickel in my opinion. But again, I think that he is not going to shy away from playing man and being out on a boundary like that. And like you mentioned with Jaycee Horn, he's in good company and a guy that can take him under his wing. And I think that's the biggest thing for me is I look at some of these players that come in, and there are some that step in right away and fit in the personnel and in the situation that they would be drafted into perfectly, right? There's others that they need a year to understand exactly what it takes to play in the NFL on a day in and day out basis. And I think that might be more so a player that I would, if you draft him and he goes to Charlotte and you are instantly putting him out there on an island against NFL players, that would be something that would be, I wouldn't be as confident in him in year one as I probably would be in year two. I think it's a guy that definitely is going to get his feet wet wherever he goes. But I don't know if I would initially put him as a man guy that's going to be holding down a third of the field right off the bat in the NFL. I think that the transition from year one to year two, a little bit kind of like you saw with Kool-Aid McKinstry, where he was not initially put on the boundary with the Saints, came within the division. I think that might be a situation that might be mirrored here if he ends up going to Carolina.
Would not be surprised if it happens. The Panthers love themselves some Gamecocks, and I'm sure the Gamecocks love themselves Carolina as they continuously draft their guys. But he's Chris Marler from Locked On Gamecocks. Check him out over on YouTube or wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts. Also, again, follow him over on Twitter, X, whatever you want to call it, at Vern_Funquist. It used to just be straight up Vern Funquist. He lost his account. He's got a new one. So it's all good. I know the follower account went down. I know that sucks, man, but I love the name. Vern Lundquist was the best Uncle Vern of those 3:30 CBS Saturdays growing up. Man. Will always hold a special place in my heart, and I'm sure yours as well. We'll take a quick pause, and we'll stick around the SEC and talk about Malik Muhammad with Brad Kellner from Locked On Longhorns. It's tax time, but for a lot of us, the old way of doing taxes is a lot. Trying to book an appointment, that's not the most convenient. Sitting in a waiting room with a stack of papers, emailing back and forth and wondering if they really get your situation. But this year, you're getting a major upgrade into it. TurboTax now has in-person locations nationwide. You can meet face-to-face with a real tax expert, and your documents get uploaded straight to your TurboTax app on the spot. And just like that, you're done. Your TurboTax expert worked to get you every dollar you deserve, while you get real-time notifications as you go about your day. It's the relief of walking in and meeting a real person and walking out knowing your taxes are being handled right. Head to TurboTax.com/local to find a store near you and book your appointment today. Save the best for last for the second time this week. Brad Kellner of Locked On Longhorns back with us as we're looking at cornerbacks. And the corner we're going to look at from Texas is Malik Muhammad, who has been linked. Some reports that he's met with Carolina not once but twice virtually. Could he be the future corner opposite of Jaycee Horn? Maybe start at nickel this upcoming season. But Brad, appreciate you jumping on again. When you look at Malik Muhammad, what stands out to you as a player from his career at Texas?
Yeah, very good player. 3-and-done guy. Very highly touted recruit coming out of the DFW Metroplex in high school, and was pretty much an instant starter for the Longhorns in 2023. Not a big ball hawk, only 3 career interceptions. So if you're into stats, if you're looking for fantasy points, if you're looking for things like that, Manny Muhammad's not really the guy for you, but really solid. Was Texas's number 2 corner in 2024, had a fantastic season opposite of Jahdae Barron, who won the Thorpe Award and was a first-round pick by the Broncos last year. And then he stepped into that number 1 corner role for Texas this year and was really solid. The game that, if you're a college football fan, you kind of know that Texas crapped the bed, for lack of a more politically correct phrase, against Florida. And they got picked apart by DJ Lagway and those young Florida wide receivers. Manny Muhammad did not play in that game. Like there was a major drop off in the Longhorn secondary this season when Manny Muhammad was not on the field. So not the most productive in terms of stats, but a consistent, reliable defensive back who went up against a lot of talented receivers in the SEC the past couple of seasons. And I don't think he's ever going to be a number one corner in this league, but do I think he can have a long career as a number two or as a nickel guy, as you mentioned, Julian? Yeah, I do. There's a lot to like about his game.
Yeah, when it comes to stats with corners, look, you don't really want to see them have too many because that means that they're being thrown at a ton. And like, there's guys, when you're the top dude, like Jahdae Barron a couple of years ago at Texas, it wasn't like everyone was trying to test him out. And they knew he was going to be a dude. And he went out to be that this past year with Denver. And yeah, the situation in Carolina, Jaycee Horn, he's their number one guy. He got paid to be it. He has been it. Mike Jackson, though, has been really good for them the last couple of seasons. And he has an expiring contract, so they may move on from him after this season. And I do think there's a need at corner. All the reports had suggested, or there's a couple of reports that suggested that they wanted a nickel, a veteran nickel to sign during free agency. That did not happen. So Muhammad could come in and be that starter at nickel, or maybe down the road be that starting on the outside. Now, when you look at him, depending on the defense that Texas run, I know Pete Kwiatkowski's no longer there as a DC. Do you trust him at the next level more as a man corner or a zone corner? Because Carolina plays a ton of zone.
Yeah, it's interesting. So did Texas this past year, and Pete Kwiatkowski's defenses were never the most aggressive. There wasn't a lot of press coverage. There wasn't a lot of bump and run at the line of scrimmage for Manny Muhammad, and that maybe worries me a little bit about his game because 6 feet 182 at the combine, that's not big. Now, at Texas Pro Day a couple of weeks ago, he weighed in at 190. So I think for the combine, he wanted to run fast. He ran a 4.42, so it worked out. I think he shed some weight for that. And then I think coming out of the combine, there were a lot of NFL teams wondering about his size and is he big enough to play on Sundays. Put on a few pounds. He's 190. Maybe he's closer to 195 right now. Who knows? It's been a couple of weeks since Texas Pro Day. But I do think he's a little better at zone. Not to say that he can't play man, but I do think for a zone-heavy defense like the one the Panthers run, Manny Muhammad can be just fine. And, we talked about stats, right? It's not all about interceptions for a defensive back. Pro Football Focus, they always grade all of these players. And I went and found this before our conversation, Julian. 366 coverage snaps for Malik Muhammad last year. I keep saying Manny. That's his nickname. If you hear me say Manny Muhammad, it's the same player, obviously. But only allowed 15 yards per game and only allowed 1 touchdown this past year, according to PFF. And he was going up, again, played Jeremiah Smith at Ohio State in the non-con, went up against some really good receivers in the SEC this year. The ball wasn't coming his way a ton, but it was going his way enough. He was a big part of Texas's defense this year. So put up some salty numbers. Very long-winded way of saying I think he's a little better in zone, but I don't think you're going to have to worry about him too much if he is going one-on-one against some guys in the league too.
No, man, paint the picture. And yeah, you go back to week 1. I think of this past season. I understand it was the first career start for Julian Sand, who ended up being a Heisman Trophy finalist there at Ohio State. But still, it wasn't like you saw a ton from Jeremiah Smith in that game. So obviously Malik Muhammad or Manny Muhammad, I hope people understood. I knew what you were saying because I knew that was his nickname. People probably were like, well, you're talking about 2 different people. It's okay, people. We got it figured out. But you look at him, probably better as his own guy. Didn't play a lot of man. I am curious, though, because he is smaller. Do you think he's going to have trouble at this next level handling some of those bigger, more physical receivers?
That's the biggest question for sure. And his slender frame could require him to move inside just where there's a little bit more help. Obviously, it's tough. You've got the two-way go playing DB in the slot, but typically you see your bigger corners on the outside in the NFL and your smaller guys inside. So maybe that's where Manny Muhammad ends up. But there's no doubt that is the biggest question about his game. He didn't play small, right? Like there are guys who are small who play big. Like there weren't a lot of moments last year where I thought Manny Muhammad was getting pushed around or bullied. It's not like every 50-50 ball went the wide receiver's way. Like he's pretty strong at the point of contact, and he doesn't back down from anybody. He is not a soft player at all. He's willing to get his head in there and make some things happen. But let's call a spade a spade. It's college versus the NFL. We could say the SEC is all this and that, and I know people love hearing folks rave about the SEC, right?
Not at all.
It's obviously not the level of NFL football. So there's no question that that is the biggest question about Manny Muhammad. Is his play strength good enough? Can he also tackle well at the next level? I thought he was a solid tackler in college, but when asked to do that, is his size going to be a problem against running backs or even bigger wide receivers? Those are things that are causing Manny Muhammad potentially to slip down draft boards a little bit. There were some moments where I thought, all right, this guy could be like an early day 2 draft pick with the way he actually played. But with those size concerns, I mean, second round pick, maybe back end of the second round, but round 3 is kind of feeling more likely for him right now. I think the biggest issue is, again, is he big enough? Is he strong enough to be successful against the bigger body receivers he's about to see on Sundays?
And I think round 3, if he's there, like that's good for Carolina. I think in round 1 and 2, they probably have some other needs that they need to address before that. But he could make some sense for them if he is there on day 2, right there in the 3rd round. The last one for you, you mentioned earlier as we were jumping on here, you don't think he's ever going to be number 1. Carolina does not need him to be that, but you think he'd be a solid number 2. Do you see his progression being from a nickel maybe as a rookie to going to the outside, or do you think that he's probably just going to always be like that nickel corner for a team?
Yeah, I don't know. That depends on the team. That depends on the defensive scheme, the defensive coordinator, all of those things. Like I wouldn't just pigeonhole him as a nickel guy right now. Like I do think, again, he was an outside corner for his Texas career and fared very well, graded out very highly, and did well against a lot of talented wide receivers. So I don't think he necessarily has to be a nickel guy. But are there some teams, because of his physical limitations, that probably view him as that? Absolutely. And for me, look, playing nickel is tougher than playing outside corner, I think. Again, because of the two-way go. Like you're now seeing, it used to be, you put your 3rd best wide receiver in the slot and that's just your guy. But now you're seeing a lot of the best receivers in football line up in the slot. And they can create matchup problems for somebody. So if Manny Muhammad is forced to play nickel, or if that's just where he translates to, not to say his role is not going to be important, because a lot of teams really specify their offense on trying to attack that position. So we'll see. Again, it depends. It depends on the defense. It depends on the scheme. Most of his college experience was on the outside, but I do think, running that 4.42 really helped him a lot. 39-inch vert too. Like he is a fantastic athlete. So I think there are some teams who are going to fall in love with some of those traits, who feel like they can line him up either inside or out and expect some pretty solid results.
The Panthers need a corner. Maybe Malik Muhammad will be that from the University of Texas. He is Brad Kellner of Locked On Longhorns. Again, check him out on YouTube and wherever you listen to your favorite podcast. Thanks so much again, Brad, for jumping on the show you did on Tuesday to talk about Anthony Hill Jr. Did it again today to talk about Malik, also known as Manny Muhammad. Again, appreciate your time on the show today.
Anytime. I'm sure next year we're going to have a number of these conversations to have with all the great players Texas is going to have in 2027. So look forward to chopping it up again sometime down the road.
I'm hoping it's not about Arch Manning, because that would mean things went really bad for the Panthers.
Disaster.
Great stuff there from Brad Kellner of Locked On Longhorns, talking about Malik Muhammad, also known as Manny Muhammad. Also, thanks to Morgan Thomas of Locked On Clemson, breaking down Avieon Terrell with the Panthers finally drafted Clemson Tiger. We talked to Eric Mackland about that a week ago. Said, why are you having me on the show? You know that's going to happen. Maybe it happens with Avieon Terrell if it's not going to be Blake Miller. And also, thanks to Chris Marler on the other side of the Palmetto State rivalry, talking about Jalon Kilgore from South Carolina. The Panthers love themselves some Gamecocks, so would not be shocked if they decide to go get another one, as that is a pretty talented secondary they had down in Columbia this past season. That's going to wrap up this edition of the Locked On Panthers podcast, part of Locked On Podcast Network, hosted by yours truly, Julian Council. Again, y'all, subscribe or follow the show free over on YouTube or wherever you listen to your favorite podcast. Yeah, be sure to follow me, Julian Council, over on Twitter and over on Blue Sky at Julian Council, where I will be back with y'all on Friday. That's tomorrow, answering your weekly Friday mailbag questions. In the meantime, be safe, be happy, be whole. As always, keep pounding. And I'll talk to y'all later today, as we'll have yet another prospect of the day here on Locked On Panthers.